We're good to go? All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 21 of the MotivateMe313 podcast. We have a great show lined up for you all today. Looking forward to a great show and interesting topics, for sure. I can tell you that. Interesting topics. And so today's show, first of all, as you can see, I got Big Bro Moti back at it again. He's in the building. He wanted to share his 2 cents, so we had to make sure that Moti is here. Of course, you got myself, Omar T, in the building as well. Sada, by the way, shout out to Sada, little sis Sada. She's starting to feel better, alhamdulillah. She will be back next week. You know, she's just coming out of the hospital, so she's starting to feel a little bit better. So inshallah, she'll be back next week on the show. And then my sister Abir is here. She's had to make sure that her blue sweater is blue enough. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. I did not notice that blue sweater all day at work. I can tell you that. All right, but shout out to Abir. She's in the building today as well. And then our guest for today, all right, is Kelly Young-Raymore. She's in the building. She is the teacher. She's a history/government teacher at Melvindale High School. You may be familiar with Melvindale because shout out to Negwa Ali. She's the connect. All right, she's the one that get us connected with everybody. And so, you know, she's in the building, got us another connection again. So shout out to Negwa. We really do appreciate her. Principal Negwa, by the way. She always gets us great people to have on the show today. So we are looking forward to a great show. Kelly, welcome. This is how we do things over here. I hope you've been enjoying it so far. Looking forward to a great show. Like I said, today's topic, we're going to be talking about racism, inclusion, you know, diversity, and all that other stuff. You know, it is February, which is Black History Month, so we wanted to make sure that, you know, our first show is covering, you know, any topics that basically it kind of relates to that as well. So before we do that, though, we got to make sure that we give you guys a heads up of how to subscribe and follow us. You know, YouTube, Oz Media 313. You have Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok under Oz Media as well. You can listen to the show later on Apple and Spotify podcasts under Oz Media. And if you want to call in, the number is 313-306-1750. Again, 313-306-1750. Feel free to call in if you want to chime in about what it is that we're discussing, and if you have any thoughts on the topics as well. With that said, we got to give a shout out to our sponsors, Hanley International Academy, Qahwa House, BC Adhesives, and the Balkan House Restaurant. Let's go ahead, since we talk about schools, let's go ahead and give a shout out to Hanley International Academy, the team that's in the semifinals.
Yes.
All right, big game tomorrow against Huda. Big win yesterday against Central. Ramsey's not back here today, but we're going to give a shout out to Ramsey as well. But we got Big Bro Yusuf, by the way, here.
If ice could kill, Mr. Burns wanted to kill me taking MZ out of practice early today.
Oh, man, I know he did. I know he did.
Like,
I was just explaining it to them. Like, I was like, she was awkward already. That's probably why she's going to come a little bit late.
Yeah.
Because she didn't
for me to even say something. I was just looking at him. He was looking at me, just ignoring me. And I'm
Hey, star players get different treatment.
Yeah, but, you know, Ramsey, alhamdulillah, he's one of those few people that, like, understands, you know, where he's at. So shout out to Hanley International Academy. Go ahead, Yusuf. Hanley International Academy. Hanley is a school that treats every student and staff like their own family. Hanley International Academy. Hanley is a school that treats every student and staff like their own family. It's even in their vision statement, educating your child like our own. Did you also know that Hanley offers a virtual academy? So if you're looking for your kid to sign up for an online school, look no further than Hanley's virtual academy. But if you're looking for face-to-face, Hanley International Academy is located on 2400 Denton Street, Hamtramck, Michigan. The athletics there are great. The academics there are great. Shout out to the whole staff for being great teachers and educators for our leaders of tomorrow. All right. So with that said, first of all, I hope everybody's doing well on this beautiful Tuesday evening. Kelly, you want to go ahead? I know I kind of, you know, briefly introduced you, but you want to go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do, and anything else you want to add on to that.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for having me here. I'm Kelly Young-Raymore. I'm currently a history and government teacher. I've been teaching, I think, for about nine years. I really enjoy it. It's one of my passions. My other passion is doing social justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion work I mean, I see my job as an educator is preparing students to be really civically engaged, productive members of society. So the DE and I work kind of goes hand in hand. To be honest with you, I kind of always have been interested in this type of work since I was a kid, but what really got me interested is being a mom of a black son, to be honest with you. Just realizing early on that I would need to advocate for him, and I wanted to make the world a better place for him. I know it sounds cliche, but that's really what it is.
It is sounds cliche because that kind of leads us to our first pretty much question of the night, which is, about a week ago, a little over a week ago now, all over social media, all over the internet, the video was released in Memphis about the Tyree Nichols situation, and this is obviously not the first one where police brutality occurred in a incident in a situation. He ended up passing away. And I'm sure everybody out there that watched it, seen what happened. The video, like I said, circulated throughout all of social media. So, what are your thoughts on that whole situation? And like you said, as a mother, as an African American mother that has a child, that has a son, what are your overall thoughts on how the whole incident and just in general police brutality and all that stuff?
So I'll start by saying I didn't see the video.
Okay.
And that's intentional.
Yeah.
I made a decision after 12-year-old Tamir Rice was murdered that I wasn't going to watch any more people be murdered from state violence, to be honest with you. So I purposely avoided it because each time you see something like that, it literally takes a piece of you away. But I did read up on the story, so I do understand what happened. And what I see is just constant dehumanizing. I think we talked about it like before we started. I said that anti-blackness permeates the universe, and that doesn't exclude black people from that because we are survivors of anti-blackness also. So I wasn't surprised by that. It's disheartening. It's sad. I think that I read a meme that said that when he was crying out for his mom, all mothers were summoned. We keep saying this because it keeps happening, but it is true. I watched an interview with his mother, and I couldn't get through it without crying. Just understanding like her helplessness and just imagining or the inability to imagine what that feels like. I guess that's what I should explain. And I have, 2 sons, and I just keep thinking about they're old enough to drive, and they're out, and having people to respond to them, and have people respond to them in that way. And it's angering. Without going down an entire tirade, I am one of the people who, even though I grew up in a home with a correction officer, my mom was one, I have really considered the idea that like policing needs to be deconstructed in the community, and we do need something, but the way that it exists now, it's not sustainable, and we keep having the same conversations. And I don't want to keep saying, well, it's not all of them. We don't need to say that it's not all of them. It's enough. Mm-hmm. And so it tells us that it's the system that's broken, not necessarily these individuals absolutely should be held accountable, but the system itself, something's wrong with it. And just the constant dehumanizing, I've talked about this before, is that you have to make active decisions to not dehumanize black men. And that's an example where that hasn't been done. And we're just going to keep seeing it until we really have like some real changes. But I can't watch it anymore. I can't watch it. Can't.
I have a question off of that. Is you said you have a son. If you don't mind, obviously anything you don't want to share, you don't have to share. But what kind of conversation do you have with your son when you hear about this stuff? And I'm sure that a lot of moms have these conversations. African American moms have this conversation in the household. But what kind of conversation do you have with your kids?
Also, like what type of prep? Because I'm pretty sure what the conversation is, a little bit of prep that goes behind it as well.
So I will tell you, there's multiple conversations. So one, like I'm in an environment now, so I'm kind of calm. Um, that's not my natural disposition. So I'm kind of a talker. Having sons forced me to garner some patience, if you will, because I'm the kind of person that would be arguing and talk about my rights to people and police when things happen. But then I realized that I have my son, and my sons, both of them are tall. But my oldest son, he'll be 23 tomorrow. Happy birthday, Jordan.
Happy birthday.
He'll be 23 tomorrow. He's really tall, and he's been tall. He's been over 6 feet tall since he was like 14.
Wow.
And so having him sit in the back seat and watching me like interact with law enforcement, I knew that they would see him differently. So I had to have a conversation with him. You don't get to respond and act the way that mommy does. And then I had to realize kids learn what they live, not what you say. So I had to change my behavior.
By example.
Because he will. He will tell them, hey, his mom's a government teacher, so he kind of knows his rights. And I would say, hey, you don't do that. Which is like counter to like your natural being to want to defend yourself. So in essence, you try to build leaderships into your kids and then you wringing them out. So the conversation is about not focusing on who's right, but focusing on what's right and making sure you make it home. So those are the kind of conversations that I have with them. Like I literally say that, don't argue with anybody. Whatever they ask you to do within reason, do it. And you don't let anybody murder you or anything like that, but you want to come home. And if there's something else, then mommy will help you deal with it. And even though he's an adult now, he's understood that even when he was a kid. He wouldn't argue with adults. He would say, okay, and then he would get his mother, and then his mother would do it. And that's still kind of been the conversation. So I've talked to him about that. I mean, we've jokingly, maybe had some conversations. Sometimes I think a lot of the officers that in situations like this, I think as being a teacher where they like bullied at school, and this is their chance to lash out. And so I tell him to kind of deal with people from that perspective, not in a condescending way, but understand that they are also people too, and want to come home, and they're also trained to be afraid. It's difficult, and it's hard because I started seeing this when my son was little, like in elementary school. I noticed the way how he went from a little really cute kid with dimples to now he's taller and darker, and just how people responded to him. So I just started having this conversation when he was young, early and often. And even now, he's an adult. Even when he was doing DoorDash, I'm like, hey, I don't want you doing it this late at night. He's like, Mom, I'm an adult. I don't care. You're still my baby. And just having that kind of conversation with him over and over, how should you respond? And the good thing is that he's receptive, and he pays attention. And most people really like him, to be honest with you. He's a likable kid, but he completely understands that you don't have to be doing anything wrong. And I have to keep drilling that into him, even as an adult, because he'll say, well, I'm not doing anything. They weren't doing anything. People leave here because they aren't doing anything. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you doing something that required a punishment of death or to be abused. So I just have that conversation early and often. Be safe. Don't argue with anybody. Comply within reason. But follow up. You're not anybody's doormat. So I'm also not the person, well, at least you just got away with it. Be quiet. No, we're going to file a grievance. I'm that kind of person too. So.
As you should. So, I thank you for sharing that information, by the way. And so, again, today's topic, as I look over here at the camera, is basically, we're going to talk about racism, we're going to talk about inclusion, we're going to talk about diversity. So we're going to be jumping on to all three of those different topics. And thank you, Kelly, for starting us off on a very serious note and a very serious moment that has happened, in our country. And obviously, we do these conversations so that we can learn from one another. All right, we definitely need to be educated a lot more. I feel like that's a lot of our reasons, a lot of our problems. Why is because we're not really educated on culture or background, and so as we do these kind of conversations or have these conversations, that's the goal: is to learn, and then use what you learned in real life. And so my next question, and I bet you could start us off, why do you feel it's important to address the topic of racism?
I feel like as a society as a whole, we're only going to advance if we learn to accept one another and learn from each other. I feel like the person I am today is because of the people that I grew up with. You know, it's because of being around people from different races, different religions. Everybody has a story. Everybody's beautiful. And no one should be treated that way. I don't care who you are, where you're from. No one should be treated that way. We live in America. We all have our rights. And it's our job to make sure that, you know, no one goes through that. Like she was saying, it's happened way too often. You know, it's sad to say, it's like normal. Like it's almost normal, and that's, you know, ridiculous. So at the end of the day, racism is not something that we should still be talking about. Like, we need to do better.
For sure. And by the way, I just want to say, you know, as I introduced her, she's a government history teacher at high school. This is a first grade teacher, so we actually work in the same building. We work together. So we got 3 teachers in the building, and then you got Big Bro Moti in the building. What are your thoughts on racism, and why do you think it's important for people to address this issue?
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to grow up in Hamtramck, and Hamtramck is a very diverse city. You know, we got to know different people from different places in the world. But growing up, I mean, honestly, like, you know, it's funny to say, but to some people that I tell them that, you know, after 9/11, I'm pretty sure a lot of Arabs, Americans, you know, experienced racism. I didn't.
Yeah.
You know, people are shocked when I say that, you know, and I don't know what it is. I don't know, like, you know, if it's the way I look or the way I talk or the way whatever the reason is, I haven't experienced any racism. You know, have I seen it in my own eyes? Of course I have, to other people, done to other people. But, yeah, I just think there's no excuse for it now. I mean, you know, people fought, people died, you know, in order for this to stop. And for it to keep happening is ridiculous. But I wanted to comment on the killing from the police. Police stations, you know, they have a specific unit. I think majority of the police stations in the major cities have a specific unit to handle guys that are aggressive or with warrants or the gangs. You know what I'm saying? Which I personally think people should look at that. You know, take away these specialty units where they're taught to be aggressive. You know, and I think that's what happened in Memphis. Is the unit was called the Scorpion Unit or something like that. You know, they're a specific unit that's, you know, specialized, you know, in handling certain people, and they were aggressive. You know, they were way too aggressive, and you know, a guy lost his life, but I think the abuse part too, that's where the line needs to stop. You know what I'm saying? As far as abuse, you know what I'm saying? And yeah, that's what I feel about it.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if there's a word above abuse, because it was definitely past that word, man.
No, it got past.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, cops, like again, abused by the cops should be the red flag right there. Like, yo, fire these guys.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? They cross the line.
For sure.
So if I might add, I'd like where you went with that at. So the thing is that we're teachers, and I want to think about officers, because I'm not against police officers. No. They are public servants like we are. But I want you to take, just for a second, think about the amount of education that's required to do your job. Mm-hmm. Ask me what's required to be a police officer in most major cities.
High school diploma.
Think about the amount of training that's required. You said your son is playing, basketball? Mm-hmm. Think about the amount of training that's required for him to play basketball, to execute a drill. Mm-hmm. Think about how long the police academy is. The corrections academy is longer than the police academy. I also think, so with saying that, this is not to excuse their behavior, but we're often putting people in positions to do things that they don't really have the capacity or the training to do. That's the first thing. And this is not in response to just what just happened. This is in general. Like, we see people with mental health issues being, incidents with the police. That's not their job to respond to mental health crises, but that's what we use them to, because we have a collapsed healthcare system, right? That makes mental health separately. So part of the problem is I think about students. So I teach high school students. So I've been a place where police were called. It was a former student that I had the year before. And I was just thinking, this kid barely, washed their hands last year, from leaving the lavatory. And now I'm thinking like they're in charge of like keeping people safe. I think that that's part of the issue. And it mainly happens in major cities. Well, part of that is because of the danger that's attached to the job and then the pay. So if you want to attract people, like professionals, then you have to pay professionals. You can't pay people peanuts and then expect for professionals to show up. And this is not, I'm not against like officers. I feel like I need to say that again. I'm not trying to demean them, but they don't have the training to do a lot of the things that we're asking them to do. They don't have, I don't think that everybody needs to go to college and have master's degrees. That's not what it is. But I do think that furthering education gives you practice with critical thinking skills and things like that you don't get elsewhere. And if you have people dealing with real world situations and they have not had enough practice with just problem solving skills that are outside of a playbook, when it's time to think on their toes, they don't have it. In addition to the fact that they're being trained to be aggressive and to see the people that they're charged with protecting as dangerous. I think that that's downplayed. That's like being drilled in their head. I'm a black woman. I had to train myself not to hold my purse when I'm in an elevator with people. I had to make a conscious decision not to do that. You get that from subliminal messaging. I think that like not enough attention is paid to that. And because of that, then we turn people out that are just not, their brains are barely even developed when you look at that. And so we're just going to continue to have the problem. As long as we have like 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, people who don't have a lot of experience coming out. Yes, they're moldable, but they don't have enough life experience to respond to a lot of the situations that they're in. The latest thing was just, in my opinion, it was just murder. That's different. That's not the same as someone not having the capacity to not lose control. But in a lot of other situations, that's what happened, especially like when you have people in mental health crisis. But this last thing, from what I read, there was actually no reason. Like, it wasn't even escalated. It was horrendous.
There's even deeper stories that, you don't know what to believe, but like there's even deeper stories about stuff. And it's like, obviously none of it gives them the right to do what it is that happened. But at the end of the day, can we give her a round of applause for that answer, by the way? Because that answer, that was a great answer.
And you make a lot of sense, because even as teachers, once we get our degree, it's not done. We have sketches that we have to do. We have to continuous professional developments, that cater to the students that we have. And police work with so many different people, so many different backgrounds, so many different, just everything. And they need to be well trained to know how to keep it professional and understand different people and different temperaments, and at the same time, how can they do that with keeping the community safe?
Yeah, and it is. It's like, just my observation, it feels like they live in constant fight or flight.
Yes.
So there's all of this research that shows that our brains we're not supposed to live in fight or flight. So they're constantly being traumatized every day also. And I'm not trying to paint them to be the victims, but what I'm talking about is I think that it's caused their brains to be rewired. If you're always in fight or flight, it doesn't leave room for anything else. Where's the critical thinking? You're just like, it's just a recipe for a disaster. Exactly. I don't even see how it's going to get better unless it's dismantled and changed.
Because even the victims themselves, they're in that fight or flight too, because they're scared of the cops.
But they're the victims or survivors or whatever, they are actually in a situation where it needs to be fight or flight. But if you hold all the authority, the law and everything is on your side, you're coming into a situation being afraid and you hold all the power. Almost the only thing that can happen is somebody else getting hurt. And it's usually not them that's getting hurt. It's the vulnerable person.
100%.
First of all, I just want to let y'all know, like, I just met Kelly about a good hour ago, but we're diving deep into these conversations, and I respect her so much for coming here, and we're getting right into it. So, Kamaris Chimden, so, hello, beautiful souls. System is definitely broken. Having sons forced me to garnish patience. Happy B-Day to Jordan, and I have 2 boys as well, soon to be 23 years old. By the way, 23 years old Jordan, by the way, is a Jordan year, too, for Jordan. So great job, Kelly. Very inspirational. Hamtramck has the whole world in a small town and no excuse for racism. So shout out to Qamar. Came on the show a couple times. We need to get her back on the show. We haven't had her on the show for season 2 yet. But going back to the question of, why do you feel like it's important to address racism? Why do you feel it's important to address that topic?
I think to make it not be taboo. I also think that there's different types of racism. I think it's important to talk about it so that people understand what it is and isn't. So a lot of times people think that racism is somebody saying something mean to them or calling them out of their name. But the way that I think about racism is as a systemic thing and as a system, not somebody's feeling. And so, like, I know that definitions and words change over time. But when I was in school, like in college and learning and studying this stuff, racism is really described. In order for somebody to be racist, first of all, you have to be in a position of power. The system has to be in power. It's not you saying something mean to me. It might be nasty, it might be bigoted, but that's not racism. Racism affects people socially, economically, not just emotionally. So I think it's important to talk about it as a systemic issue so people understand what it is. And how it impacts people. Then we need to address it so we can control our, I think, like, just control our environments, right? Control, or not control, impact. I want to get rid of the word control, but just impact our environments, impact the way that our kids grow up, impact the type of world that we want to see. But we can't do that unless we talk about it, like ignoring something or allowing everything to be racist. I hear kids saying that to each other all the time. Yeah. Oh, he said this word, that's racist. No, it's not. And so we've got to stop that because it also waters down what it actually is. You have to have perceived economic, social power over someone. And to be honest with you, none of us belong to a group that have that in this country. We might have it in our own little communities, but not in this country. So we can do things that are mean, but we need to talk about racism for what it is and its impact on people. So I think that that's important. So that's why you have to talk about it, because otherwise we give people the wrong idea about what it is and it's not.
No, I agree, and that's a conversation I do have with my students too. The middle schoolers, everything could be racist in their eyes, and so depending on the situation. So it's definitely a conversation. I tell them, like, that word is such a strong word that you need to be careful the way you use it, because, like you said, it could water it down, and when you just sit there and say every little thing is racist and stuff like that, like, you kind of discredit the stuff that probably you are going through that you probably don't even realize in front of your two eyes. Yep. And that kind of leads to the next question of just like, have you ever been a victim? I know, Moti, you said that you haven't. And I thought you another great answer of how it's not just really words. It's more of like the system and everything like that. So does anybody want to share like maybe a specific thing or just in general? What would you feel about? You're laughing, you're smiling. Do you have a specific incident or maybe just in general, educate us a little bit more about the system?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Black woman living in America. I've absolutely experienced racism. But what I should probably say is most of what I've experienced has been microaggressions, which is not overt. And being in the educational space, you experience it. I am grateful. I have not experienced it where I am now. And I do think it's, I work with a good team, so that's good. But I've worked places where I've experienced that from parents, one thinking I probably shouldn't be teaching their kids. Like, is she smart enough to teach our kids? Or just talking about things that are uncomfortable. I'll give a specific example. I teach a global issues class and I taught a social justice class. And so usually in that class, I do like a privilege walk exercise. And I talk about privileges as superpowers, not as anything for people to feel ashamed of, because we all have privilege in some way, shape, or form. And so we did a privilege walk, and I do a silent privilege walk. It's not a privilege walk where people have to get up and like, I have privilege and I'm a bad person, or I need to be ashamed of it. It's not like that. It's really reflective. And so we have this privilege walk, and I had like some parents be upset that I had the discussion with their kids, like this is a part of life. Now I should also preface that this is in the world of people not really understanding what CRT is, and so they thought that that's what was happening. And in fact, if it was happening, that it must be something bad. I experienced that. I had a principal during November ask me why was I talking about Native American heritage every day. So in my classroom for my bell ringers, I like to follow the diversity calendar. So for example, November is Native American Heritage Month, February is Black History Month, March is Women's History Month, April is Arab American Heritage Month. And so all of my bell ringers relate to that. And so he came to my class, I teach government, and he was like, why were you showing a bell ringer about a World War II pilot? And this is the administrator. And I said, well, I told you that my bell ringers relate to the diversity calendar. It happened to be April, and the first pilot that was the ace pilot in the World War II was an Arab American. And so that's why I was showing it. I was talking to the students about it. And he didn't understand why I was talking about this. And it was a problem. So just even that, and then his response to me after that and for the rest of the year was because they felt uncomfortable with these conversations that I was having, and just made work like uncomfortable, to be honest with you, because of it.
That's interesting that you brought that up, because now you made me think of a situation too. Do you have something before I get into this story right quick? Or
a lot of mine are also microaggressions. I haven't had something really like hindered me. I have noticed people around me have situations. I remember I was in college, and I speak perfect English. I grew up here. I was raised in Detroit, so I could conversate. I can do things that anyone can do, like a normal student. I did have one of my friends in the class spoke broken English, and I'm not gonna lie to you, the teacher really used to be annoyed of her. Like, you can tell, like the teacher in charge always hated when she had her hand up. Sometimes would shorten the conversation after class. Like, she would always want to stay after to ask questions or whatever, and she'd be like, well, you have to get a meeting with me. Like, it was always so stuff like that. I did have an instance where I was tutoring, I was doing my hours, and a parent didn't want me to tutor their child because they assumed that I didn't know what I was teaching. Like, how is she going to teach my daughter reading? So I seen that, but I try not to, the thing is with me, is like you were saying earlier, I tell people, ask me whatever you want. I don't get offended when people, can I ask? I'm like, ask me. I'd rather you ask me than assume and then just leave the room without us having a conversation. So I feel like just being open-minded in a way where you can ask, nothing is stupid. I don't care what it is, even if it's offensive, it might be offensive. I take it in a lighthearted way where it's it makes it easy for them to talk to me. So to say that I've experienced something personally, no. But, like you said, just small instances where, there were racist remarks, but nothing where a systematic or a situation like that. So. Yeah,
and so for mine, it's more of a story of realizing of the system and how it could be working against certain individuals. And this is a school system, by the way. So first of all, our at a school that I was at, the principal told myself and it's an African-American lady to go and attend this professional development. It was a 6-week professional development, 1 day a week though. And so it was a 6-part professional development. It had to do with cultural responsiveness. And so I remember we were at the professional development, and they did that. Okay, you've probably seen or probably been a part of it. Where they try to show you okay, raise your hand if you've ever, move this way if you've ever got this or got that. And the next thing you know, you realize that the only people that were standing there were African American people that had to deal with everything, all that stuff. And then it makes you realize, but it was a great professional development. But he wanted us to go there so that we can bring it back to our school and pretty much have a professional development at our school that we're at. And when I tell you, and I was so happy that he picked us because this was something I always wanted to have this conversation. When you wanted to have this conversation, I never really had a chance to do it. So that PD, we were we were hammering with statistics too. There's no reason why. And I'm a Yemeni, you know what I'm saying? The students were Yemeni and African American, majority of the students, and the numbers of kids who are getting suspended was ridiculous. African American students, compared to the Yemeni kids for same incidents, for same situations, and we're just going at, and then some of the teachers were upset at these numbers and the way we were doing it. And I remember one time, are you they asked, are you trying to say that we're targeting African American students more. And I looked at that teacher in the eye, and I was like, the statistics are saying that we're targeting African American students more, And but yeah, like you could just tell that it was one of those conversations that once you left the room, I remember the principal came up to me and said, "You guys did such a great job." Like, it was just one of those moments where like you felt like people were learning, but at the same time, it had to be said. It had to be a conversation that needed to happen, because you got to be aware. Sometimes you're not even aware. Sometimes it just kind of happens.
Yeah.
And you don't really realize it, and until you actually learn and educate yourself, because so that's why I say ignorance is a bliss. Like, people don't know. Like, they don't know. Like, sometimes people just don't know.
So just ask instead of assume, and get to know the students, especially in the school system. I'm sick and tired of teachers thinking they could just walk into a room and start teaching and assume that all the students are going to be cooperative and learn and try their best. I feel like at the end of the day, as teachers, it's our job to get to know our students, to see the struggles that they go through, and to help, bridge that gap, so they can feel like they're loved and respected, and then they'll be able to show their true potential.
So I agree. I don't know that that's the job of educators. I think that we feel like that because we're parents.
Okay.
So I'm learning to temper that. I do think that we have a responsibility to build relationships with students, but I also think that it's unrealistic to expect for us to meet all the needs of 30 people in the classroom, especially with all the things that are going on with students. And there's not really space built in to deal with that. I think we feel like that because I think that comes from, I think that's a cultural thing, and things from being moms.
And also your high school, I'm first grade. I have 24 kids that I see every single day.
I see almost 200 kids a day.
So yeah, I understand that completely.
So, but I think that if you do the work on the front end, it makes it easier on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad that you brought up the statistics about students, because my son was one of those students. So we talked about what got me into this work, and this is that. So you talked about growing up in Hamtramck, which is the most diverse city in America. My son went to school in Troy, which is the second most diverse city. Very different. So it's very diverse in terms of the people that exist, but the belonging isn't the same as it is that I've seen in Hamtramck. I've made great relationships and great connections there, but in terms of student discipline and the reason why. So it's not to say that our children aren't doing things in school that need to be addressed. It's more so how we address them and being aware of the long-term implications and impacts of how we discipline students. That's the part, that people are missing. So yes, you may need to address something that a student is doing, but to constantly suspend Black girls and boys from class, making them behind in school, and the school to prison pipeline that's not just made up, it actually exists. You can see it. That's the part that people miss.
Yeah.
And, but you have to find a way to talk to people about privilege so that they're not disarmed. And I'm not saying like frou-frou it and make people like to water it down, but we need to think about, this is why I like to think about privilege as superpowers and not as something that people need to be condemned or ashamed of. It's really all a privilege is something that you enjoy that other people don't, and you can use it to help them. And when it's presented that way, you sometimes can disarm them from feeling shamed because shame paralyzes you. You know what I mean? Like, we want people to pivot and change their behavior. So that's always funny. But yeah, my kid was one of those kids, just every time you turn around, it's something. They all liked him. He's this and that. He's wonderful. He's coming. But anything he did, like, let's try to suspend you or have you out of school, or just really they don't have the ability. A lot of times Black kids don't get the ability to just be kids and make mistakes that are kids. But I also see that not just with Black kids. So having the opportunity now to work with, most of my students are Yemeni, I see that with them also. So you have to remind yourself that these are still kids, and you don't want their lives derailed or, you know what I mean, like just demeaning them and breaking their spirits.
Moti, I know we kind of had a teacher conversation over here, Moti.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on everything that was just mentioned?
No, you guys are right, man. I was gonna bring up the fact that we grew up in a neighborhood where it was like 50-50. I was talking about Detroit.
Yeah.
You know, we grew up in Detroit, then we moved to Hamtramck, but we grew up in an area where it was probably like 50-50, you know, Arab and African American, and we got along with everybody, you know. The thing I wanted to mention is, you know, about educating yourself. Those that aren't around Arab or African American, get to know, you know what I'm saying, one of them, you know what I'm saying, just so you could, you know what to say, what not to say. But I'm not gonna lie, you grow, like, even though I knew what to say, not to say, you know, what to talk about, what not to talk about, and nowadays it made me kind of like watch what I gotta say, even though I know, because a lot of things are sensitive. You know what I'm saying? And that's going back to what you were saying earlier about there's abusing the word of racism. You know what I'm saying? There's you know, there's racism, and there's you know that. But yeah, I just feel like you know, you guys brought up some great points.
Thank you so much. And this is a good time for us before we move on to inclusion. Does anybody want to say any final comments about that as well? I just want to make sure everybody, we're going to go ahead and give a shout out to our second sponsor of today. Let's give a shout out to BC Adhesives out there in Wisconsin. And then we'll get into inclusion. And then we'll also talk a little bit about diversity as well. So go ahead, Yusuf. Shout out to BC Adhesives. BC Adhesives. You can go to BC Adhesives for all your industrial adhesives needs. They do food packaging, book binding, product assembly, and many other industrial services. So if you are in need of adhesives for your business or having trouble with your current adhesives applications, you can contact them by phone 1-888-679-9825 or go on their website www.bcadhesives.com. All right, we are officially back. We hope that you're enjoying. I can tell you one person that is. It's Qamar right here, because she's hyping us up right here in this comment section. You know, comment section right here. You know, the whole world changed. We change and grow every day. Very deep convo. You are all wonderful. I agree. I bet life is a cycle and it doesn't take much to teach, but the system makes it hard. Shout out to Qamar. We appreciate you for chiming in. And so now I kind of want to talk about inclusion. All right, so. Moti, my next question is, like, what does inclusion mean to you? And then do you see it in today's society? So what does inclusion mean to you, Moti?
I mean, inclusion mean to me is involving all parties, no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what your race, no matter your color, no matter anything.
Gender.
Yeah, gender, yeah. And do I see it now? I don't think I see it as much as I want to, but I think it's getting there. You know, I think it's getting there. I just think, you know, obviously there's improvements that need to be made in all spaces, but I think it's slowly but surely getting there, because you're seeing men, women, different races in all kind of fields as far as work, you know, nowadays. And probably not as much as what people want them to, you know, to be, but, you know, I see it heading in the right direction.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, obviously people are starting to be a little bit more aware of it, but it's not where it needs to be. You know, we were kind of chatting about the, you know, at the school that you're currently at and stuff like that, like how it's, you know, the lack of diversity and stuff. So, I mean, it's definitely not where it needs to be. I think people are a little bit more aware of it, and they try to address it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, more times than not, people do what they're most comfortable with, which is not the best case scenario, especially when you talk about the topic of inclusion. But I do think people are at least beginning to become aware of it, which is, I think, the first step, right? You got to be aware of the situation, then hopefully you start to take action. You know, back beforehand, it just be like, hey, we're gonna just hire this person, or we're gonna hire this person. You know, I know this person. So I think they're starting to become a little bit more aware of it. What are your thoughts, Abir?
I want to talk about more in the classroom atmosphere. I feel like with the students with disabilities, EL students, English language learner students, I feel like it's definitely more inclusive. They're trying to push the least restrictive environment for students that have, you know, disabilities or different, you know, attributes that will affect their learning. But I think it's a lot more better than when we went to school, because when we went to school, everybody was out of the classroom. Like, if anyone had a special need or whatever, they weren't included in our classroom. I see with just the first graders, that's kind of what I know, whatever. They're way more welcoming with one another. They're way more understanding. They help each other. It makes me feel like the future is, a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more brighter, than us when we knew that someone had a disability or IEP. Like, oh, something was wrong with them. Now they don't even realize a student in the classroom has it. So I can see it definitely in the educational field, at least with the classrooms. It is getting pushed forward in an inclusive environment. But then again, I know we're going to talk about the workplace and further, but that's where I feel like it's still, who do you know? A lot of the times people don't like to give certain people an opportunity or a job that they can actually exceed in. But in the classroom, I definitely see it.
I'm gonna go ahead and ask you the same question about inclusion. What are your thoughts on it? What does it mean to you? And then, are you starting to see the world be more inclusive?
Yeah, so for me, I think that inclusion, or when we say something is inclusive, it really just means that people are able to bring their ideas to the table.
Yes.
I do think that with the invention of the internet, I do think that we have more inclusion. I think that in the workspace and even in schools, that inclusion itself exists. I think, though, that we live in a unique place. So Detroit, in Metro Detroit in itself, is very segregated. So it's sometimes difficult to recognize that there is actual inclusion. I also want to say that I'd like to think of it outside of just race and ethnicity. And so because of that, I think that there's a lot of inclusion. I think that there's inclusion like just with religious diversity, neurodiversity. So I do think that those things, they do exist, that you're able to put your ideas on the table. Whether they matter or not, that's a different conversation. We can talk about that later. But I do think I see diversity, and I feel good about it. I think that that's one of the things that this generation, I think, does better than we do. I grew up in Detroit. It's very insulated. Where I grew up, everybody looked like me. Most of my teachers did. We had some white teachers, but that was the extent of the diversity. And I think that the kids that we teach and the kids that are now, just because of the internet and where they go to school, they are much more inclusive than we were. I think that is one of the good things about the next generation. That's something I'm proud of for them.
Yeah, we're sports guys, me and Omar, and Omar could attest to this. In the sports world, I'm talking about referees, I'm talking about coaches. You're starting to see more female, more people of color, a diversity, and this wasn't the case 5 years ago. So I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, and that is my next question, is about diversity now and in the workplace too. So, do you feel like that's also happening, and do you feel like are we where we need to be with that as well? We can start off with you, yeah.
So, yeah, I like to think of it like in a couple. So diversity is just more faces in a place.
Yeah.
So yes, I do think that that's happening. I think that there's a conscious effort to do that. I like the comment you made about like people getting in with like who you know. I don't necessarily think that that's wrong, but I do think it's wrong when it happens and someone's not qualified to do it. So for example, like we all just met each other, but now that I've met you and even the conversations that we had, I'm already thinking about other things that I can do or that I do that you would fit into that. And so I don't think it's wrong that I would say, hey, this is going on, let me call them. But if you were like not qualified to do it, that's when the issue comes in.
100%.
So for diversity, I think that we're doing a good job of getting the people there, because that's what diversity means to me, just sheer representation. Inclusion usually means that you get to put your ideas on the table. Where I think we need to push the boundaries, like I talk about like belonging, and that's when I get to have an idea, my idea matters and holds weight. I don't think we're there yet, but I think that's like the next frontier. Like that's something that we should work on. And I got that just from a friend of mine who does this work. She has an organization, and just learning from that, we started talking about like what's the next step, and it's that belonging piece. And I think that's hard. Like we have to keep evolving, and sometimes people get tired of like, okay, I did this, now I got to do something else. But that's life. Like we have to keep evolving and keep getting better. So,
what are your thoughts, Abid?
I'm a big advocate for having like people in higher positions, like leadership positions, mimicking the community. You know, so if the school is a majority of a certain type of race, I feel like there needs to be someone with that same race in a higher leadership position. A lot of the times you'll find institutions where like the leads are all specific race, and then it doesn't match the people that are there, and then there's like that culture block or that culture. But then again, qualifications matter as well. So I do see it. But like you were saying before, like with qualifications along with diversity, putting those together, and also having their word count is a big deal. Because a lot of institutions, when they have a certain people that are in charge, it's very hard for them to break that, to actually believe that someone of color can bring something to the table as well. So for me, it's definitely changing, because a lot of people are becoming more educated. A lot of women are stepping up, and I do see it, but like we still have some work to do.
Listen, I still can't believe till this day that women get paid less than men in the same job. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, I couldn't believe it, that it's actual fact,
We can't either.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm being for real though. Like, I'm being serious. This maybe goes back to inclusion more than diversity, but to me, that's like
Quality,
that's
equity.
Yeah, equity too. Like, that's mind-boggling to me, because like, what is the reasoning? You know what I mean? Like, what is the actual reasoning if we're both qualified? But I'm about to put you in the admin role right quick, okay? Give you scenarios. Are you ready for this? All right. You got person A and person B. All right. Person A, let's say the 90% of the students are African American, okay? And then 10% other. All right. So person A is a white female applying for an assistant principal job at your school. You're the principal. Applying for the assistant principal job, has 3 years of experience as an assistant principal. And then you have an African American female woman who is also applying for that job, has 0 experience as an admin, but does have all the degrees and certifications needed to become an admin. What would you do in that kind of scenario? Like, do you just pick the best candidate, or do you favor something more than the other?
So that's a really great question.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that.
That's
I was just
okay.
wondering.
That's what I do. So here's the thing. I'm aware of what my biases are, and so I don't try to act like I don't have them. Mm-hmm. And so because I know I have them, it's so funny because I talk to other admin about stuff like this. Because I'm aware that I have them, I wouldn't be the only person that's making the decision. And these are the kind of things that you go over before you go into hiring practices. I also want to say that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And so what that means is that just because somebody is black, it doesn't mean that they necessarily have the heart to do what needs to be done. And I also, I think we're saying the same thing. I do think that you want to diversify staff, but it doesn't have to look exactly like the people that you're servicing, because that's not what the world looks like. We all have to interact with people who look different than us, have different beliefs than us. And especially with working with children, we set them up for failure if they live in a world where they're just in this enclave where everyone looks like them. They never have to deal with anybody else. They never have to push themselves. So I want them to be safe, have a safe environment where it's comfortable, but I don't want it to be I don't think that we need to be in an environment where everybody only looks like, that's just not the world. So to answer your question, I wouldn't be the only person doing that. And when doing hiring, because I've been in other roles outside of education where I did the hiring, I try to come up with some checklists before I go into it and make a decision based on that. So that's not enough information for me to make the decision. I do think that qualifications aren't the only thing. You can have that stuff. I hire for attitude and flexibility, because you can train for the other stuff. Mm-hmm. And if somebody was a different race, but they really had a lot of experience working with children and understood, because of the kind of kids I service, they understand trauma-informed practices, or are they going to say all the kids need a spanking? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't want to deal with that either. So
wait,
it's hard to say.
All kids should not say that. Is that what you're saying?
You should not say that. Because that's not going to solve everything. So I don't know. People are nuanced and complicated. So that's not enough information for me to make the decision. And anytime I go into a situation where I'm having to hire somebody, whether I'm the admin or we're hiring some company to come in to do PD or something, we talk about we put our biases out on the table first, and we really talk about them. Like I take that I don't know if you have taken that, the IAT, so you can identify what your biases are. So you really need to be aware of them. I am aware of what my biases are. And so I try to check myself. I am lucky, like I work somewhere now where I have people I can do that. Like even my principal, he's a white man, but I can go to him and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. And I can have that conversation. I know what my biases are and where they lie. I think that's important whenever you're hiring, that you do that. This comes up in folks that work in medicine. I know you work in pharmacy. You don't have to write the scripts, but I'm pretty sure you see it with all these people and these opioids. And they think everybody wants medication. And so you have to be aware of those things. And so that's not enough information for me to make it off of, but I would never be the only person making a decision.
Hold on.
It's a great answer, by the way. I want to say
very good, very good answer. Kelly, I had to add something to that. All right, so you said necessarily you wouldn't want the admin to be the same race or same, as majority of students, because the world's not like that. You said, right?
I wouldn't want them only to be.
Yeah. Like.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Only okay.
One, because I should probably clarify. Because the world isn't always like that, and you don't have to be there to be fair. The other part is that in my experience as a black person in a place where like extreme minority, what ends up happening is oftentimes they will not hire black people to teach children. They'll have them in admin roles. They have very little interaction with students. They're mostly interacting with staff. That's not really helping kids. Honestly, what helps them is the people that they're interacting with if we're talking about education, the people that they interact with every day, that matters. I was in retail management. It matters to me, I think, to when people come in and they see a face that looks like them, that's friendly, that understands, is not annoyed because they have an accent. It doesn't matter who the manager is sitting in the back that they never see.
That's true.
So the important part, you should have decision makers to be empathetic, and they absolutely, if possible, we should have that, but that's not a requirement. I just think that there needs to be representation. Metro Detroit fools people. Hamtramck is unique in Metro Detroit. Most of Metro Detroit is not like that. It's very insulated. Like my friends who grew up in Dearborn, they're like, I grew up when everybody just looks like me and around me. That is not the real world.
Absolutely.
That's
Culture
like that in
shock
Michigan.
will hit them real quick in college.
And we are, like that's a whole history lesson. But when you go other places, it's not like that. Poor people live with poor people, middle class people, and it's very diverse. But it's not like that here. So I think that if most of our kids aren't going to stay around here anyway, I think it's okay that they don't have everyone look like them, but you do need to have people who are empathetic. You do need to have some representation in a lot of it. But like, just depending on the population that you're servicing, they might not go into education. You got to pay people so you can attract people.
No, the reason why I brought that up because of the whole issue, I think, I don't know who brought it up earlier about suspensions, about suspending that person of color different than the other one. Maybe a person of color was admin, be kind of fair a little bit. You know what I'm saying? No, I'm saying because the numbers were high on one end and not the other. You know, even like for instance, like me personally, if I was an admin and knew a student who was raised by a single father, for instance, all right, you know, the single father, he is working the night shift. You know, kids at grandma's house, he gets off the night shift at 7 o'clock, whatever, 7:30. He's 10 minutes late every day. As an admin, I'm looking at that like we gonna let that go. This guy is doing things by himself. We applaud that. We actually encourage that. You know, we support that. Where another person won't get that. Rules are rules. You know, they'll look at it as rules are rules. She's late. You know, she's tardy. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I meant by that. Also, another situation. All right, I'm not gonna say no school's name, but let's say a certain school has this majority amount of a particular people that celebrate a particular holiday, for instance. Okay, so I know. Correct me if I'm wrong. If a certain amount of students miss a day in school, does that day count?
No.
Okay, so let's say the school majority of students get to miss that day for that holiday. Okay, 85%, let's say, 75%, whatever. As an admin, I'm gonna have my voice like, guys, we should make this a no school day because it's not going to count anyway. That's what I meant about.
So that's really a great point. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. I remember being like a parent liaison when my son was in school in Troy. And so we had a diversity, equity, and inclusion council. And that was one of those things where one of the things that we tackled was creating a diversity calendar. One of the things is just that, like, so Troy is really diverse. So we had kids, of course, always during the Christmas time, people had that time off. Always during Easter, that time was off. But kids didn't have time off for Ramadan. When Yom Kippur came around, we didn't have it off. And part of it was just like, so that is admin, but it's also making it so that parents know that they can speak up too. Like, that's more so like a training thing. Like, one of the things that, like, coming to Melvindale, like, to know that they had that time off, that was like great. So now I don't have to worry about like scheduling assignments after, around, like, don't schedule a bunch of stuff around Ramadan. The kids aren't going to be here. Whereas before I worked places, nobody like cared, or I shouldn't say care, we didn't know until we put this diversity, equity, inclusion group together, and we knew, okay, let's stop having parent-teacher conference on Yom Kippur and then say the parents don't show up, or stop having stuff on, on different holidays. So they have a lot of a huge Hindu population too. And so we didn't know what the high holy days were for Hinduism. That's just a conversation. We don't necessarily need to have a Hindu principal to know that. That's a conversation. That's a parent survey. What are the dates that are important? And maybe we can't honor everybody's, like, give the time off, but it helps teachers to know not to, I know you know that, like, let's not give a project around this time. But those are really good points. Those are ways around it. We could absolutely do it, but the truth is we're not going to get a lot of people who, for example, maybe Hindu, who want to teach, because one, it's just not it's not what's taught, it's the pay. Honestly, like, it's a privilege to be able to teach. You almost have to all the teachers I know either have second jobs or they have spouses that make a lot of money. So it's a privilege that a lot of people don't have, and the rest of us, like, have second jobs or something. Like, so some people you're not going to be able to track to do the jobs anyway. So we won't ever have that representation. I think, like, in all the years I've been teaching, I've worked with one Indian teacher. It's just not something that's even promoted.
I really do applaud admin who push to have like a parent liaison or a equity or a diversity inclusive, or get the parents involved, because a lot of schools don't like that. They don't like when the parents are too involved, They don't even want to have a PTO. You know what I'm saying? So I do applaud that.
So that's cool. Like, I have not experienced where they don't want them. I've been on the extreme ends of both. I've been where we don't have parents to be able to do it. And then the idea is that, the parents don't care. And that's not really the case. The parents are at work. You mentioned, like, single parents. I remember when my kid was in school, I was one of the few people who was a single parent at the time. So it was just something that people didn't necessarily even understand, like the running late or whatever. That's hard. So I kind of agree with you. Like, I couldn't be the room mom who was there all the time. And in other schools where I taught at, the parents are at work, or it's just not something that they've learned to be involved. I've never been where they're like, we don't want parents. There might be certain parents people didn't necessarily want to deal with, but not that we didn't want parent help. I've been more so on the end where we're shunning parents or talking about them because they're not at school, and not really thinking about, have we made this a welcoming place for them? Or, do they feel that this is a place where they're welcome and that their input is valued? Or have we figured out how to reach them because they're at work? So maybe we have to change when we're having meetings or how we engage with them. Maybe it's virtual meetings or whatever the case is. So,
great points. All right, great points. I'm loving this conversation. I hope that you are enjoying it at home.
Put me on the team, bro.
Yeah. Moti out here bringing up points too. Moti out here doing his thing. So my next question is, how do we address, what advice would you give people to addressing these topics of racism or inclusion or lack of inclusion or lack of diversity? Like, how would you advise someone to address these topics? I could start off with you. I don't think I've started off with you in a while. So how would you, advise somebody to address these topics?
I would say ask questions, like I said before. Don't assume. If closed mouths don't get fed. If you don't like something in the school system, talk about it. Start up a conversation. Get your background information down. Like, make sure you come in with facts and statistics. Be that person that's also welcoming as well. Don't be that judgmental person, or don't get offended if someone's asking you a specific question. Communicate, educate people around you, let people know. Don't just stay quiet and just, in your head, just, I don't like how that is or whatever. Like, actually step up, in an honorable way, and just be open to different ideas, and don't feel like the world's against you. I feel like that's another thing, is that we sometimes feel like, oh, that's on purpose, or maybe they don't know. Maybe they would love to have a conversation. Maybe if you just would have told them and explained to them the reasoning behind it, they would be open to new aspects. So, just communicate. Literally.
That's what I was gonna say, but like, people don't understand that. People just don't know sometimes. Like, they really don't really can comprehend. I know that they assume like they're an adult, they should know, but there's so much misinformation out there that they really probably don't know. And I think we underestimate that aspect of it. So communication is very key.
And also being an example, like killing people with kindness. Like, if you see someone, you can tell, you see some aspects of them, like, oh, okay, I definitely know this person don't like me, being that person that they can't not like anymore, stepping up in a way where they see you like, oh, wow, this person, like, changing their mind about a whole culture. You can literally change someone's mind about a whole culture of how you carry yourself and how you, are open and just, is everything okay? Like, are we good?
Yeah.
Like, talk to me. Can we, or I really don't like that, and this is the reason why.
Yeah.
So.
No, great point. The way you carry yourself definitely helps too. I guess the question is, how would you advise somebody to address these major issues like racism or lack of diversity or lack of inclusion?
I feel like you summed it up.
Yeah,
like, I feel like that's the same thing I say. I just I had to learn this though, to try to assume positive intentions from everybody. And that's hard, right? To not always be on defense when you've lived a lot of your life in fight or flight. But I try to assume positive intentions of everybody. And I've made it a point to really listen to people. It is a skill. I had to practice it. My friend Yarlin helped me with it, but I listen to people and try to find out where they're coming from. And what I find out is that most people are really trying to come from a good place. And I just stopped writing people off and just assuming positive attention and diving into it and trying to figure out, like you mentioned, like coming with facts. That works for some people, and some people, I realize, they don't operate off of facts. They're like emotionally driven. So I have to get to the heart of that. And the only way to do that is to listen to them and see where they're coming from. I'm a facts person.
I'm a big fact.
So if you show me, show me the facts about it. I'm emotional, but if you show me the facts, like show me the black and white about it, then you can win me over. But that's not everybody, because sometimes you can show them, and it doesn't mean that they're wrong and I'm right. It means that I need to meet them where they are, and I need to find out where they're coming from. Why do they feel this way? And then sometimes I can win them over that way. But I just stopped assuming that everybody was ill-intended.
How about you, Moti? How would you advise somebody to address issues like that?
Honestly, guys, not playing around, but we are blessed. I'm gonna tell you why we're blessed, because of where we grew up. Like in Hamtramck, what we seen, what we dealt with, honestly, it was a big plus in my life. Mm-hmm. I could literally walk into any room and make a connection somehow, and just like you said, do not come in that room, whatever, or that place and have negative thoughts. Go in there as positive. Don't judge a book by its cover, So that's what I would, tell people. Always think positive. I was once, a very defensive person. No matter what, I was just on defense. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people don't know that I don't like that, so they're just talking normal. But to me, I took it as offense, and I learned that about myself, and I changed that about myself. And I think, if people start, being more positive than negative, I think it'd be all right.
And so, great points, by the way, everybody. I think they had a great answer. Were you about to say something, or?
Yeah. This is just a quick story, just to help people understand how you can laugh something out at the end of the day and build a connection. So my name is Abir, right? Obviously Muslims, we don't drink, but I had multiple teachers growing up, because it's just they would hear my name and they would make, a joke or whatever. Another, like, a person could get offended, like, oh, why are they making fun of my name, blah, blah, blah. But I always took it as like, hey, it's not that big of a deal. It's okay. We'd laugh about it, and then I'll tell them what it means in Arabic, and then we'll move on from our day. A lot of people, I feel like they get so quick to be like, oh, they're being disrespectful, or why are they, and then not, seeing the joke behind it. Like, just, I don't know. It's not that serious. Like, I feel like at the same time, like.
No, I mean, there's times where I have to correct my kids, honestly. You know what I'm saying? Because, they grew up, part of their life in Hamtramck, but they haven't fully got the experience, other people really, other races. So sometimes I gotta correct them, because sometimes the things they watch on TV or on TikTok and YouTube, it's wrong, So I have to have these conversations with them, and the reason why, I like them is they want to know. They're not like ignorant. They're not, like stubborn. Where it's like, nope, this is the way. What's his name? Darman told me. But yeah, you know what I'm saying. So I'm more like, I'm talking to him like that. Like, nah, that's wrong. This is what
Teaching them the culture.
For sure.
Sounds like they need to watch some more Oz Media, Moti.
Oh no, they do. You know what I'm saying.
Shout out to Big Bro Moti. Shout out to everybody here.
Please like and subscribe.
Yeah, there you go. We're gonna get into that in a little bit. So this is the part of the show where we kind of have a Motivate Me 313 minute. My sister basically brings out the phone and she's gonna record this so that we can pull this clip out. And so kind of take it with us so that we can make this a post to let people know about this show as well. So my question to you, Kelly, all right? If you had to give a speech, okay, about to end racism right now, this like you're about to give us, the speech that's about to end racism forever and always, all right? What is it that you would say? It's on you.
So I even thought about this question before I was coming, but if I were going to give this speech to end all speech, right? To end all, discussion about racism, it would really be, I would encourage everybody to assume positive intentions and lean in. Even when things are difficult or uncomfortable, don't run away. I think that a lot of what's unresolved is because people are uncomfortable. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable and facing your fears and confronting what isn't right and what isn't just. And calling a spade a spade. If something is not right, you need to say that. You don't need to be rude and offensive, but you need to call it out. But before you do any of that, you have to do the self-work, which is constant, and that is important because it is difficult for people to receive things from you when you are a mess, when you don't treat people with kindness, when, and consistently, I'm not saying like not having a bad day, but it's very difficult for people to receive anything from you when your life doesn't reflect that. And we're not talking about perfection, but really do the work. Ask yourself some key questions like, when did I first learn about race? What do I know about DE&I and belonging? What do these things actually mean to me? Answer those questions first and sit with those. And that will help us to end it until we answer those questions about ourselves. How did I come to believe what I believe about race and ethnicity and religion? How did I do that? Answer those questions, working on yourself, and the other things will come. And I've seen it in my own life, so I do know that it works.
Beautiful.
Can we give that a round of applause?
She literally summed every day, all day, like what we just talked about, and I love it.
Now I see why they got you over there at Melvindale High School. They recruited you well. You said you wanted to come to Hanley. Is that what you were talking about before? Is that what it is? We're gonna get her. All right. Well, with that said, listen. First of all, we hope that you enjoy this show. Obviously, if you watch live or watch it later, this is conversations that we need to have. We need to have these conversations. I love having these conversations because, again, one, I educate myself even more for my own selfish ways, I guess, for my own selfish reasons. But of course, for you all, you know, you can learn so much by talking. Like, I know you were just mentioning, like, you know, you were comfortable with that conversation, like, about your name and stuff. Like, to me, that's what it's all about, man. Like, it feels so good to, you know, we have our friends, you know, growing up, like, we clown each other, and we're comfortable because we
Yeah.
grew up with each other. We had the conversation. We had those awkward conversations.
We've been
you
in
know?
their houses,
We've
their
been in their
moms, dads.
houses. Yeah,
We've leaned in.
Yeah, we leaned in. Yeah, that's what
I
it
love
is.
that.
So it's like once you do that, man, I'm like it's so much fun. Like, it's funny. It's hilarious. Like, we have a great time with each other because we got over that hump, you know, of just that awkward stage. And so, you know, I just think that that's what it is. It starts with conversations. Have those conversations. If you're at home listening, you know, talk to people, get to know people. And like Moti said, that's the blessing is that we grew up in a city that it kind of forced us to. Our neighbors were one person from this country, one person from this country. So it was nice.
Now it's
to
a
have
lot
that.
different, but
Yeah.
when we were in school, it was a little bit of everybody.
Yeah.
Literally.
So, you know, we enjoyed that. Before we give out final words, I do want to say, like Moti was saying, be sure to subscribe, like, follow YouTube Oz Media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok under Oz Media. You can listen to the show later on Apple and Spotify podcasts under Oz Media. We hope that you enjoyed this. Anybody has any final words? Kelly, we'll start off with you. Any final words you want to give out there? People can follow you. Anything you want to mention, you know?
Really, just thank you for having me on the show. I really enjoyed myself. I learned so much just from listening to all of you, and I know you're doing great work. My only final thoughts is just really just, you know, lean in and continue to do the self-work, and just, you know, remember to use your privilege as a superpower. We all have privilege. Don't assume because you're part of a marginalized group that you don't have privilege. We all have some sort of privilege, and make sure that you're using it to help somebody else.
Great point. I bet Moti.
It was a pleasure having you on. If you thought that you learned, we learned a lot, and just tapping into your mind was an honor, for sure.
Yeah. Shout out, Moti.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I actually came here today to my brother's house for food, but he told me the topic, and I'm like, I'm in. You know what I'm saying? And I'm glad I was in because honestly, Kelly, we appreciate you because even though with my experiences, I feel like I kind of know, you taught me from a different perspective where now I know, you know.
More.
No, she's
yeah.
the perfect balance because at the end of the day, you know what's going on, right? But at the same time, you do know that, you know, what you carry as well. And a lot of the times people feel just that defense, you know? And with you, I feel like you have that balance where you understand where you stand, but you also know there's no problem, you know? So that was a great way to see that, for sure.
And that's how she wrapped up her Motivate Me 313 minute. Yeah, that was perfect. So it was perfect. We hope that you enjoyed the show. We hope that you stay safe, you know, enjoy, and we'll see you all next week. We'll actually be on Zoom next week. We'll be getting ready. There's a big, I think it's called a Galentine's Day Gala happening in 2 weeks. So we'll have all the ladies who are responsible for that next week through Zoom. So we'll actually be through Zoom next week. We'll see you all again next week. Enjoy yourselves.